Hi everyone, I'm Lindell and I'll be discussing advanced data analysis techniques. So before we start, let's tackle what is data analysis. So data analysis is the process of cleaning, transforming, and interpreting data to uncover insights, patterns, and trends. So as the volume, variety, and velocity of data increases, the ability to process and analyze it will be very crucial. So as defined by Clive Hambly, a well-known data scientist, data is a new oil. So like oil powered the industrial revolution, data powers the AI and digital transformation era. So for researchers, understanding and leveraging data science techniques is essential for evidence-based conclusions and impactful discoveries. So why is data analysis important? So data analysis is the most crucial part of any research. It allows researchers to understand the information gathered, test hypotheses, and draw conclusions. So it's process of interpreting raw data through logical reasoning and applying various statistical and analytical techniques to understand patterns, relationships, and trends within the data. So we have two types of data. So in data analysis, you will commonly encounter two types of data, quantitative and qualitative. So understanding the differences between these two types of data is essential for selecting appropriate analysis methods and drawing meaningful insights. So let's discuss first what is quantitative data. Quantitative data is numerical and represents quantities or measurements. So it's typically collected through surveys, experiments, and direct measurements. So this type of data is characterized by its ability to be counted, measured, and subjected to mathematical calculations. So examples of quantitative data includes age, height, sales figures, test scores, and the number of website users. So we have here characteristics of quantitative data. So number one is numerical. So quantitative data is expressed in numerical values that can be analyzed and manipulated mathematically. The second one is objective. Objective in a sense that it can be measured and verified independently of individual interpretations. Third one is statistical analysis. So quantitative data lends itself well to statistical analysis because it allows for applying various statistical techniques such as descriptive statistics, correlation analysis, regression analysis, and hypothesis testing. Lastly, we have generalizability. So quantitative data often aims to generalize findings to a larger population. So it allows for making predictions, estimating probabilities, and drawing statistical inferences. So let's go to the second type of data, which is qualitative data. Qualitative data, on the other hand, is non-numerical and is collected through interviews, observations, and open-ended survey questions. So it focuses on capturing rich, descriptive, and subjective information to gain insights into people's opinions, attitudes, experiences, and behaviors. So examples of qualitative data includes interview transcripts, field notes, survey responses, and customer feedback. So we have here the following characteristics of qualitative data. So number one is descriptive. Qualitative data provides detailed descriptions, narratives, or interpretations of phenomena, often capturing context, emotions, and nuances. Next one is subjective. So qualitative data is subjective and influenced by the individual's perspectives, experiences, and interpretations. Third one is interpretive analysis. No, qualitative data requires interpretive techniques such as thematic analysis, content analysis, and discourse analysis to uncover themes, patterns, and underlying meanings. So this will be covered in the next slides. Next one is contextual understanding. So qualitative data emphasizes understanding the social, cultural, and contextual factors that shape individuals' experiences and behaviors. And lastly, we have rich insights. So qualitative data enables researchers to gain in-depth insights into complex phenomena and explore research questions in greater depth. So let's go with the advanced data analysis techniques. So advanced data analysis techniques involve the use of sophisticated statistical methods, machine learning algorithms, and computational tools to uncover patterns, insights, and predictions from complex data sets. So these techniques go beyond basic descriptive statistics and inferential tests, enabling researchers and analysts to handle large, high-dimensional, and unstructured data. So we have here three advanced data analysis techniques. So let's discuss first the machine learning technique. So machine learning, or commonly known as deep learning, depends on algorithms to inform what actions are taken and then produce an inferred action. So under machine learning technique, or deep learning, we have methods. So number one is supervised learning. So the supervised learning is a technique that is more commonly used in machine learning because it deals with straightforward and easy to implement. So data inputs are labeled with an answer that the algorithm should arrive at. So which helps the machine pick out patterns in the future, better differentiate data, or make predictions. So supervised learning is classified into two categories of algorithms and is ideal for problems where there are reference points available. So number one, we have classification. A classification problem exists when the output variable is a specific category. Next one is regression. So regression problem exists when the output variable is a real value that fluctuates. So for example, dollars, weight, and measurement. So we regularly use supervised learning to teach ourselves or someone else a new task. So it's kind of like being given a test with an answer key. So once you have the task mastered, this technique can be applied to similar processes and information. So the second method under machine learning technique is unsupervised learning. So in this technique, the machine learning model learns organically instead of receiving a data set with explicit instructions. So it then tries to automatically find structure in the raw data through analysis and interpretation. While supervised learning is the easiest one, we don't always have the access to complete, perfectly labeled data sets to train the algorithm. So where supervised learning has the right answer, supervised learning is helpful in situations where analysts or really anyone asks questions and the algorithm doesn't have the answer, or there are more than one answer. So the unsupervised learning model is classified into four different categories of algorithms, so which group data based on similarities or relationships among variables. So number one, we have clustering. So the deep learning model looks for data and features that are similar, then groups them together. The next one is association. So by reviewing key attributes in the data, an unsupervised learning model can predict other attributes that they are commonly associated with. So number three is anomaly detection. So in this instance, the model is used to call attention to data outliers. So for instance, banks detect fraud by looking for unusual purchase patterns with customers, no? Like if a card is used in a two different locations in the city or in one day, I mean. So the bank notices and investigates the activity. So last one, we have artificial neural networks or autoencoders. So an autoencoder takes input data, compresses it into code, and then tries to recreate the input from that code while removing any signal noise so that the quality is improved. So we also have here other less known machine learning methods. We have here semi-supervised learning. So this method combines aspects of supervised and unsupervised one, where the process and the reference data are known, along with the intended result, but the data is incomplete. So it pulls from supervised learning using the reference data that's available, but also incorporates unsupervised learning to make a best guess on the new result. And lastly, we have reinforced learning. So, I mean reinforcement learning. So this method uses rewards and feedback to find the optimal method of accomplishing a task. So for example, this is used to train robots with artificial intelligence, and we experience it when playing video games that give rewards after completion of a task. So let's go with the multivariate data analysis. So multivariate data analysis is a type of statistical analysis that involves more than two independent variables, resulting in a single outcome. So many problems in the world can be practical examples of multivariate equations, as whatever happens in the world happens due to multiple reasons. So we have here the objectives of multivariate data analysis. So number one is multivariate data analysis helps in the reduction and simplification of data as much as possible without losing any important details. Number two is as MBA has multiple variables. The variables are grouped and sorted on the basis of their unique features. Number three is that the variables in the multivariate data analysis could be independent or independent. It is important to verify the collected data and analyze the state of the variables. Number four is that in multivariate data analysis, it is very important to understand the relationship between all of the variables and predict the behavior of the variables based on the observations. Number five is it is tested to create a statistical hypothesis based on the parameters of multivariate data. So this testing is carried out to determine whether or not the assumptions are true. So let's discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the multivariate data analysis. So number one in the advantages is as multivariate data analysis deals with the multiple variables, all the variables can either be independent or dependent on each other. So this helps the analysis to search for factors that can help in drawing accurate conclusions. Number two is that since the analysis is tested, the drawn conclusions are closer to real-life situations. So under disadvantages of multivariate data analysis, so we have number one, multivariate data analysis includes many complex computations and hence can be laborious. Number two is that the analysis necessitates the collection and tabulation of a large number of observations for for the various variables. So this process of observation takes a long time to complete. So we have 7 types of multivariate data analysis. So number one is structural equation modeling, or SEM. Is a type of statistical multivariate data analysis technique that analyzes the structural relationships between variables. So this is a versatile and extensive data analysis network. So SEM evaluates the dependent and independent variables. So in addition, latent variable metrics and model measurement verification are obtained. So SEM is a hybrid of metric analysis and structural modeling. So for multivariate data analysis, this takes into account the measurement errors and the factors observed. So the factors are being evaluated using multivariate analytic techniques. So this is an important component of the SEM model. So number two, we have interdependence technique. So the relationships between the variables are studied in this approach to have a better understanding of them. So this aids in determining the data's pattern and the variables' assumptions. So number three, we have canonical correlation analysis. So the canonical or correlation analysis deals with the relations of straight lines between two types of variables. So it has two main purposes. So number one is the reduction of the data, and number two is the interpretation of data. So between the two categories of variables, all probability correlations are calculated. So when the two types of correlations are large, interpreting them might be difficult, but canonical correlation analysis can assist to highlight the link between the two variables. So number four, we have factor analysis. So factor analysis reduces data from a large number of variables to a small number of variables. So dimension reduction is another name for it. So before proceeding with the analysis, this approach is utilized to decrease the data. So the patterns are apparent and much easier to examine when factor analysis is completed. Number five is cluster analysis. So cluster analysis is a collection of approaches for categorizing instances or objects into groupings called clusters. So the data is divided based on the similarity and the label to the group throughout the analysis. So this is a data mining function that allows them to acquire insight into the data distribution based on each group's distinct characteristics. So number six, we have correspondence analysis. So it's a table with a two-way array of non-negative values. So this array represents the relationship between the table's row and the column entries. So a table of contingency in which the column and row entries relate to the two variables, and the numbers in the table cells refer to the frequencies. This is a popular multivariate data analysis example. So number 7, we have multidimensional scaling. So MDS, or multidimensional scaling, is a technique that involves creating a map with the locations of the variables in a table as well as the distances between them. So there can be one or more dimensions to the map. So a metric or non-metric answer can be provided by the software. So the proximity matrix is a table that shows the distances in tabular form. So the findings of the trials or the correlation matrix are used to update this tabular column. So let's discuss big data analytics. So big data analytics, or BDA, in research refers to the process of collecting, processing, and analyzing large and complex data sets to extract meaningful insights. So it involves the use of the advanced computational techniques such as machine learning, artificial intelligence, and statistical models to identify patterns, trends, and correlations that additional data analysis methods cannot handle effectively. So how big data analytics works. So number 1 is collecting data. So researchers gather data from multiple sources, including online platforms like social media, websites, and surveys and questionnaires, sensors, and IoT devices, scientific experiments, medical records, public and private databases. Number 2 is process data. So once data is collected and stored, it must be organized properly to get accurate results on analytical queries, especially when it's large and unstructured. So one processing option is batch processing, no? So which looks at large data blocks over time. So batch processing is useful when there is a longer turnaround time between collecting and analyzing data. And we also have here stream processing that looks at small batches of data at once. So this processing shorten the delay between the time of the collection and the analysis for quicker understanding or quicker decision making. So stream processing is more complex and often more expensive. So the third one is clean data. So raw data is often messy, so it must be cleaned before analysis. So this step includes removing duplicate or irrelevant data, handling missing values, standardizing formats, and converting unstructured data like text or images into structured formats. And the last one is analyze data. So various analytical techniques are applied depending on the research objective. So we have here descriptive analytics. So it summarizes past data trends like statistical reports. The next one is diagnostic analytics, which identifies causes of patterns like correlation analysis. We also have here predictive analytics that uses machine learning to forecast future trends. And lastly, we have prescriptive analytics that suggests the best course of action based on the data insights. So big data analytics cannot be narrowed down to a single tool or technology. So instead, several types of tools work together to help you collect, process, cleanse, and analyze big data. So some of the top major players in the big data ecosystems are presented here in my presentation. So number 1 is Hadoop. Hadoop is an open source framework that efficiently stores and processes big data sets on clusters of commodity hardware. So this framework is free and can handle large amounts of structured and unstructured data, making it a valuable mainstay for any big data operation. Number 2 is NoSQL databases. These are non-relational data management systems that do not require a fixed scheme, so making them a great option for bigger raw unstructured data. So NoSQL stands for not only SQL, and these databases can handle a variety of data models. Next one is MapReduce. So MapReduce is an essential component to Hadoop framework. serving two functions. So the first is the mapping, from the word itself map, which filters data to various nodes within the cluster. And then the second one is reducing, from the word itself reduce, which organizes and reduces the results from each node to answer a query. Next one is yarn, or YARN, that stands for yet another response, resource negotiator. So it's another component of second generation Hadoop. So the cluster management technology helps with job scheduling and resource management in the cluster. So second to the last is Spark. It is an open source cluster computing framework that uses implicit data parallelism and fault tolerance to provide an interface for programming entire clusters. So Spark can handle both batch and stream processing for fast computation. And the last one, we have Tableau. It is an end-to-end data analytics platform that allows you to prepare, analyze, collaborate, and share your big data insights. So Tableau excels in self-service visual analysis, allowing people to ask new questions of governed big data and easily share those insights across the organizations. So let's discuss the advantages and disadvantages of big data analytics and research. So number one in advantages is data-driven discoveries and evidence-based research. So big data enables researchers to extract patterns, correlations, and trends from large data sets, leading to more reliable and objective conclusions. Then this enhances the credibility of the research findings, as decisions are based on the empirical decisions rather than assumptions. Number two is improve accuracy and reliability. So advanced machine learning in AI models can detect subtle patterns and anomalies in complex data sets, leading to more precise results. Number three is faster data processing and analysis. So traditional research methods often take years to process and analyze data manually. So with big data tools such as Hadoop and Spark, researchers can process and analyze vast data sets in real time or near real time, significantly reducing research timelines. Number four is interdisciplinary research applications. So big data is widely used across multiple research fields, including healthcare and medicine, like drug discovery, disease prediction, and genomics research. Under social sciences, analysis of public opinion, behavioral patterns, and demographic trends. Under environmental science, we have climate modeling, biodiversity conservation, and disaster management. And lastly, we can also use big data analytics in business and economics for consumer behavior analysis, financial forecasting, and market research. So number five is predictive and prescriptive insights. So when we say predictive analytics, it helps researchers forecast future trends based on historical data, improving policy recommendations and planning. Then under prescriptive analytics goes a step further, suggesting optimal solutions for research problems such as disease treatment strategies or economic policy recommendations. So number six, under advantages, we have enhanced data visualization and interpretation. So big data tools provide interactive dashboards, charts, and simulations that help researchers visualize complex information easily. And this makes it easier to communicate findings to policymakers, stakeholders, and the public. So number seven, we have scalability and integration with open data sources. So researchers can integrate multiple open access data sets, digital archives, and real-time sensor data into their studies. And then cloud computing allows for scalable storage and computational power, ensuring that growing data sets can be managed efficiently. So let's go down to the disadvantages of big data analytics and research. So number one is privacy and ethical concerns. So research often involves sensitive personal data like medical records, financial information, social media activity. So inadequate data protection can lead to privacy violations, ethical concerns, and non-compliance with data protection laws. So number two, we have high cost and resource requirements. So implementing big data analytics in research requires expensive computing infrastructure like cloud storage, high performance servers, and also skilled data scientists and analysts, which may not be available in all research. Number three is data quality and integrity issues. No, so we have here inaccurate or incomplete or inconsistent data can compromise research findings. Data may come from different sources, making it difficult to standardize and clean before analysis. Missing values, biases, and duplication in data sets can distort the results. Number four, we have technical complexity and skill gaps. So researchers need expertise in data science, programming, and AI to analyze big data effectively. So many researchers lack formal training in those areas, requiring collaboration with data specialists. Number five, we have bias in data and algorithms. So if data sets are not representative of the entire population, research findings can be misleading. So machine learning algorithms can reinforce pre-existing biases in the data, leading to ethical dilemmas. Example like bias hiring algorithms, racial disparities in the healthcare research, and etc. Number six is over-reliance on quantitative data. So while big data excels at numerical analysis mentioned earlier, it may overlook qualitative aspects such as human emotions, ethical considerations, and historical context. So in fields like social sciences and humanities, no, qualitative research methods, interviews, ethnography are still essential for a holistic understanding. And number seven of the disadvantages is legal and compliance issues. So researchers must ensure they adhere to legal frameworks when collecting, storing, and sharing data. So regulations such as informed consent from participants, data anonymization, and strict security measurement. So failure to comply can lead to legal repercussions, funding loss, or reputational damage. So overall, which one to use? So the choice between machine learning, multivariate analysis, and big data analysis in a thesis or a on a research paper depends on the nature of the study, research questions, and the type of data available. So if your thesis is or your paper is statistical and explanatory, use multivariate analysis. If you are building predictive models, use machine learning. And if your research involves processing large-scale data, use big data analytics. So let's discuss the qualitative coding. So qualitative coding is a process of systematically categorizing excerpts in your qualitative data in order to find themes and patterns. So let's discuss the benefits of the qualitative coding. So number one is it increases validity. So qualitative coding provides organization and structure of data so that you can examine it in a systematic way to increase the validity of your analysis. Number two is decreased bias. So qualitative coding enables you to be aware of potential biases in a way data is analyzed. Number three is accurately represent participants. So qualitative coding allows you to evaluate if your analysis represents your participant base and helps you avoid overrepresenting one person or group of people. Number four is, and the last one, is the enable transparency. So qualitative coding enables other researchers to methodically and systematically review your analysis. So how do you code qualitative data? So the way you code qualitative data depends on your research goal. but the process generally follows a few key steps. So first, you need to read through your data and assign labels or codes to different sections. Then you go through your multiple rounds of coding, starting with the basic summary of the content, and later on, adding your own interpretation. So after that, you group similar codes into themes and analyze them to draw conclusions for your research. So we have here deductive and inductive approaches to qualitative coding. So let's discuss first the inductive coding, which is the ground up coding. So inductive coding is a ground up approach where you derive your codes from the data. So you don't start with preconceived notions or preconceived notions of what the code should be, but allow the narrative or theory to emerge from the raw data itself. So this is great for explanatory research or times when you want to come up with a new theories, ideas, or concepts. Next one is deductive coding, which is also known as a top-down coding. So where you start by developing a code book with your initial set of codes. This set could be based on your research questions or an existing research framework or theory. So you then read through the data and assign excerpts to codes. At the end of your analysis, your code should still closely resemble the code book that you started off with. So this is good when you have a predetermined structure of how you need your final findings to be. For example, program evaluation studies may utilize a deductive coding approach. So combining deductive and inductive approaches. So in practice, research studies often combine both deductive and inductive approaches to coding. So for example, you could deductively start with a set of codes, but then inductively come up with the new codes and iterate on the codes as you sift through your data. So let's go with the steps for coding qualitative data. So how to do coding. So number one is do your first round pass at coding qualitative data. So the first round pass of coding qualitative data involves reading the data and assigning codes to various excerpts. So we have here examples of coding. So number one is in vivo coding. So which using the participant's own words. Number two is process coding, which capturing an action. Number three is open coding, an initial round of loose and tentative coding. And number four is descriptive coding. From the word itself, descriptive. You summarize the content of the text into a description. And then structural coding, you categorize sections of your text according to the specific structure with the intent to continue analyzing within these structures. And then we also have here values coding. With values coding, you code excerpts that pertain to the participants' values, attitudes, and beliefs. And then last one, we have simultaneous coding. When we say simultaneous coding, it's a method of qualitative coding wherein a single excerpt of qualitative data is coded with multiple codes. So number two of the step is organize your codes into categories and subcodes. So after the first round pass at coding qualitative data, you can now begin to group your codes into categories. So these categories can be organized in a variety of ways. Within each category, you can group together codes that are similar to each other or pertain to the same topics or general concepts. So iterate on these categories and move the codes around until you find a structure that makes sense for your analysis. So number three of the step is do further rounds of coding qualitative data. So next, do further rounds of coding qualitative data to re-examine the codes and categories you've created so far. So in this phase, you may rename, recode, merge codes, and recategorize the work you've done. So while the first round of us at coding data was fast and loose, so these rounds of coding are about reanalyzing, finding patterns, and getting closer to developing theories and concepts. So in general, you should be reducing the number of codes from your initial round of coding and actively reflecting on how to best categorize the codes you have. So we have here examples of coding under the second round pass. So number one, we have thematic analysis coding. So find recurring patterns and themes. Where next is pattern coding. So with pattern coding, you group similarly coded excerpts under one overarching code to describe a pattern. Number three is focus coding or selective coding. So with focus coding, you create a finalized set of codes and categories from your first coding pass, or often from open coding. So number 4 is actual coding. So with actual coding, you relate codes or categories to one another. And then we also have your content analysis coding. With content analysis coding, you examine and understand the content of the the textual data. And then we also have here theoretical coding. So with theoretical coding, you conceptualize a hypothesis of a theoretical framework through sorting and organizing codes. Second to the last is elaborative coding. So with elaborative coding, you apply a theory from a previous research study and observe whether or not your current codes and categories relate to each other. And then lastly, we have longitudinal coding. So with longitudinal coding, you organize your existing codes and categories in a way that enables you to compare them over time. So down to the last slide, we have here the approaches to qualitative analysis. So number 1, we have grounded theory. This develops theories directly from the data. It involves iterative coding and constant comparison between data and the emerging ideas. Next one is we have thematic analysis. It focuses on identifying patterns and themes, flexible and widely used across disciplines. Number 3 is we have content analysis. It quantifies and interprets the presence of specific words, phrases, or concepts. This can be applied to textual and multimedia data. Next one, we have narrative analysis. It examines the structure and the content of the stories within the data. It also explores how individuals construct meaning through their narratives. And then last, we have discourse analysis. This focuses on language use and communication patterns. So this explores how language reflects and shapes social and cultural context. So that's all from my end. Thank you so much for listening. Bye!